For most of us, the theatrical cuts are just a highlight reel that misses the soul of the journey. To truly understand the stakes, you have to look at what happened in the extended editions that changed the story from a simple fantasy into a complex and devastating tragedy. Alright, if you've only ever watched the theatrical cuts of The Lord of the Rings, you haven't actually seen the entire story. You've seen the greatest hits version. While the theatrical versions are masterpieces of pacing that won 11 Oscars, they leave out some massive gaping holes in the logic of the world. It's honestly a bit of a running joke in the community that the theatricals are just a very long trailer for the extended editions, but the reality is much more significant than just adding a few more walking shots or a couple of extra orc fights. The real value of the extended editions isn't in the quantity of the footage, it's in the way it recalibrates the moral compass of almost every major player. When you put all those scenes back in, you're not only filling time, but you're also restoring the actual motivations that drove the plot forward. Without them, characters like Faramir or even Aragorn can feel a bit one-dimensional, or worse, their actions don't quite line up with the weight of the lore. We're talking about pivotal moments here that explain why a kingdom fell, why a son was desperate for approval, and how a villain we spent 2 movies fearing actually met his end. So, if you're skipping the extra hours, you're essentially watching a version where the soul of the characters has been trimmed for the sake of a theater's bathroom break schedule. This loss of depth is most obvious when you realize the trilogy's primary antagonist was completely erased from the final act's theatrical release. It's still pretty wild to think that in the theatrical version of The Return of the King, the guy who was the primary threat for the first 6 hours just kinda disappears. Saruman is basically the face of the industrial evil in Middle-earth, yet if you're not watching the extended edition, his story ends with him looking out a window while the heroes ride away. Feels kinda like a massive loose end, because it is. Peter Jackson actually caught a lot of heat from Christopher Lee himself for cutting his death scene, and once you see it, you realize why it was so essential for the closure of the story. In the extended cut, we get the confrontation at Orthanc, where Saruman tries to use his diplomacy of the tongue to manipulate everybody one last time. It's honestly a masterclass in how a fallen wizard operates, trying to sow discord even while he's losing. When Wormtongue finally snaps and stabs him, leading to Saruman's literal fall from the tower onto a spiked wheel, it's not just a cool death scene. It's the symbolic end of the machine age that he tried to build. Without this, the Ent's victory feels unfinished, and the threat of the 2 towers never really feels resolved. It gives the heroes and the audience the closure needed before the focus shifts entirely to the shadow growing in the east. And with the wizard gone, the focus shifts to Gondor, where a much more personal and tragic family drama was waiting to be uncovered. This is easily the most significant shift in character depth across the entire trilogy. In the theatrical version, Boromir comes off as a bit of a greedy jerkwad who cracks under pressure, and Faramir feels like a secondary version of his brother who eventually does the right thing. But the extended edition changes the game by adding in that Osgoloth flashback. Now, this scene shows the 2 brothers together after a victory, and you can finally see their bond. More importantly, you can see their father, Denethor, and his absolutely toxic favoritism. I won't lie, it's kind of a gut punch to see Denethor openly dismiss Faramir while putting the weight of Gondor's survival entirely on Boromir's shoulders. Now, all of a sudden, Boromir's desperation for the ring, it's not just about power. It's about a son trying to save his people and earn the respect of a father who will never be satisfied with anything he does, ever. When Faramir later says he wants to show his quality, it carries 10 times more weight because you've seen the psychological abuse that the guy has gone through. And this dynamic turns the struggle for the ring into a tragic attempt to buy a father's love. It humanizes Boromir's failure and makes Faramir's eventual choice to let Frodo go a massive act of defiance against his father's will. And without these scenes, you aren't just missing context, you're missing the entire emotional heart of the men of Gondor. But as the human drama intensified, a horrific messenger was preparing to deliver a psychological blow that nearly broke the hero's will to fight. Okay, when the Fellowship reaches the Black Gate in the theatrical cut, it's a high-stakes standoff, but the extended edition introduces a character that turns a tactical gambit into a psychological massacre. Enter the mouth of Sauron. Now, this isn't just a creature with a terrifying hyper-extended grin, he's the ultimate gaslighter. This dude rides out and tosses Frodo's mithril vest onto the dirt, flat out telling Aragorn and Gandalf that the halfling suffered horribly before he died. In that moment, for the hero standing in the dust, the quest is over. They have every reason to believe that the ring is back in Sauron's hands and that their entire world is officially ending. This completely shifts the stakes of the final battle. In the shorter version, the March on the Black Gate is a brave distraction to buy Frodo time. But in the full version, it's a suicide mission fueled by pure, hollowed-out grief. When Aragorn whispers for Frodo, he's not just saying it to be inspiring. He's leading a desperate final charge to avenge a friend he believes is already dead. It makes the eventual sight of the eagle and the collapse of Barad-dûr a true miracle rather than just a planned conclusion. I mean, really, watching the heroes fight while thinking that they've already lost everything, that adds a layer of grit that the theatrical version just can't touch. The crushing weight of despair was the final test for a man who had spent his entire life running from his own shadow. In the books, Aragorn is pretty much ready to be king from page 1, but the movies decided to give him a reluctant hero arc. But in order for that to actually work, you need the extended scenes, or he just comes off like he's got a mad case of procrastination. One of the most vital additions is seeing him at his mother's grave in Rivendell. Now this is a quiet moment where he talks with Elrond about the shards of Narsil, and you realize his hesitation isn't about being lazy or scared of responsibility. It's a deep-seated fear of his own DNA. He's terrified that the same weakness that led Isildur to keep the ring is pulsing through his own veins. The extended edition bridges the gap between Strider the Ranger and Elisar the King, by showing the slow, painful process of him accepting his heritage completely. We see him looking at the statues of his ancestors and having these heavy, lore-rich conversations that explain why he spent decades, wandering in the dirt instead of sitting on a throne. It turns his journey into a battle against a legacy of failure. So, by the time he actually draws the reforged sword, it feels earned, because we've seen the internal war that he had to win first. Without these beats, his sudden transition to kingship feels a bit like a costume change rather than a profound spiritual evolution. Those restored moments prove that the true story wasn't found in the battles themselves, but in the quiet, heavy choices made in the dark. So, if you had to choose, which would you rather have? The fast-paced action of the theatrical cuts, or the 5-hour commitment worth it to see the true broken heart of Middle-earth? Let us know in the comments down below.